meeting you right where you are on your foster care journey. This is the Forgotten Podcast.
Welcome to the Forgotten Podcast, where we are bringing you stories from the foster care community and here to offer you hope and practical help for your foster parenting journey. I'm Jami Kaeb, and so very happy to have you with us. This year, we're going to spend some time exploring some more complex and sometimes even frustrating aspects of foster care, one of them being school. Childhood trauma, multiple placements, special needs, and learning gaps can really work together to make school especially challenges for our kids in care. And today we hope to offer practical help for several common struggles our kids face. Today we have an episode full of ideas to help our kids who are not bound for college. We want our kids to thrive as adults. Today, I'm so happy to welcome Jonathan Brush, a first-generation homeschool graduate, the president and CEO of Unbound, and homeschool, foster, and adoptive dad of 8. Great. I love 8. I have 8 kids also, Jonathan.
Awesome.
Jonathan has spoken for over a decade to parents, students, and groups across the country about effectively preparing young adults for life. So, Jonathan, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here, and I really love what you do. And so it's really exciting to be able to share some of the things I've been blessed to learn, and I hope that it's helpful to you and your audience.
Awesome. Well, I am looking forward to this conversation for sure. And I know you are passionate about helping young adults thrive in whatever path they're pursuing. You know, there has been a wrong, maybe expectation sometimes that college is the only way, right? The only path to success. And that's not reality. So what does success mean to you, especially as you think about high school graduates transitioning into young adulthood?
Well, I really appreciate you warning the audience about my passion, because I am super excited about this. And if I speak live, I'm telling the first row, like, you might want to just move back a little bit just so you're not too scared. And so this first question I love so much because everybody gets to do something for a living. And for over 25 years, I've gotten to watch, I got paid to work with students transitioning from being young adults to being full adults. And during that time, you get a chance to say, hey, what works and what doesn't work? And this is one place where I'm really passionate about saying, like, look, if you don't listen to the rest of this podcast, if I could just impart this piece to you, it would be this. We so often tell our young people, no matter what their background is, we want you to be successful, we want you to be successful, we want you to be successful. The heart behind that is lovely. I'm not arguing with that at all. The problem is that the cultural idea of success is so deep that what you are inadvertently or sometimes purposely telling a student or a young person is that I want you to be successful, which means that you achieve some level of fame, fortune, or power. And I tell folks all the time, I'm not against anybody being rich, famous, or powerful, but I do know that if that's your definition of success, two things are true. One, from a spiritual perspective, I think that's dangerous. Like, I think it's going to leave you empty. But second, fame, fortune, and power are interesting because they're unusual. So we tell young people to be successful is to achieve some level of fame, fortune, and power. We set them up for disappointment because most of them won't be exceptionally rich, famous, or powerful. And consequently, I watched this sequence take place. Lots of optimism graduating from high school, launched to be successful. Fame, fortune, and power is way harder than anybody ever told you. That optimism fades to cynicism. Like, oh, I don't know if they told me the right things. That cynicism fades to bitterness. I think they deliberately lied to me. The bitterness can often fade to despair. I don't even care anymore. And that has real serious implications.
Yeah,
and
wow.
So what is well-intentioned actually ends up being accidentally poisonous. And so we've taken to saying, let's say something different. Rather than saying, I want you to be successful, even though that's what we really do want, let's say, I want you to thrive. And it's not that thrive is a fancy word. It's that thrive doesn't have a cultural definition. And so when we say, in the work that I do, we want you to thrive, and this is not like that we own this, right? It's more like, let's define that. And so I think successfully becoming an adult means some measure of being able to accept full responsibility for your life, to be able to prioritize relationships, to serve others by being extraordinary and ordinary, which means you have a call to be excellent, but you don't have to be famous to be excellent, to know how to create value, which is a little different from knowing how to make money. It's more important, to be able to live resiliently, and then from our perspective, to do so in the light of eternity and for the glory of God. And if you've got some measure of those things, fame, fortune, and power may or may not be there. If they're there, you'll know what to do with them. If not, you'll still live a meaningful, important, worthy life. And that's really what we're trying to get at.
That's so important, and it is interesting how have words have meaning. I mean, it's like certain words carry with it certain expectations. And so I love that you said, like, thrive, for example, is not a fancy word. It's not like it's a brand new word, but it doesn't yet have like a negative cultural connotation like success does. I think that's really interesting.
There's a little bit of a, I mean, it's you could pick a lot of words, but at least this one it's positive, right? And then it gives you a
Yeah,
chance to have that
right.
second conversation. And I don't know the word is as important as just understanding that, what I'd like to convey is that let's not accidentally set our students up to think that, our young adults up to think that fame, fortune, and power is the measure of what they want to gauge the success of their life by.
Right, right.
And if we can get off of that, then I think we've gotten somewhere important. And then that gives us perspective to allow us to sort of think differently about how we prepare our young people for what's next, depending on their particular challenges and needs.
Absolutely. So we know I mentioned this at the front. Sometimes college is a great path to thriving, and sometimes it isn't. What are some non college options available to young adults today?
Yeah. So one of the things I like people to do is I like people to step back, and it's kind of like the success thing. When I think what happens, and I know this because I'm a parent as well. Four of my students have graduated, or four of my children have graduated, right? So I've gone through this at some level. There is a cultural freight that comes with college, and the cultural expectation is that college is more than educational. A college is an adult making machine. That I can send a young adult, a kid in one end, and out the other end will come an adult. And that's kind of now the college's problem, not mine. And as a parent, it's a very nice designation of success. I got my child ready to go to college. I paid for them, helped them get there, whatever that happened. College is on you to give them now a credential that will set them up to earn a living, and then they're off to the races. Ideally, perhaps even married and living someplace. What I mean? There's this. So we've got this expectation. Well, the problem is colleges don't see themselves as adult making machines, and they're not really designed to be adult making machines. And so it's worth backing up and saying, what is college for? And what do colleges think that they deliver? And unfortunately, the market forces have made colleges think that they deliver the credentials that people need to work, but that's not really true and never has been. But it is true in certain places. So, if you're going to be an engineer, you need to go to traditional college in some
Mhm.
fashion.
Right,
I have a
right.
son in nursing school. You need to go to nursing school.
Yep.
And they're really good at those things. But there's other things that colleges are not as good at and are not as necessary as they used to be. So there's and this is no way to belittle or demean colleges. It's just the reality of the world that we're in. And that requires taking one step back, which is to understand what it means to have knowledge.
Mm.
So prior to like the last 20 or 30 years, it was hard to obtain new information. I don't know Jamie, if this is your case, but in my case, but if anybody sees visually, I've got enough white in my beard to say that when I was in high school, if I didn't know the answer to something and my parents didn't, I would have to drive to a library to access that information, right?
Yeah.
And so that sounds really quaint now. It seems really normal to me, but it's not normal to my children, for example. Um, and so that meant that if you're talking strictly from a business standpoint, business moves at the speed of information, right? So
Mm.
the more letters behind your name, the more likely you had access to information quickly. So high school graduates
Mhm.
are better than college graduates better than high school, master's degrees after that, et cetera, right? Well, of course, that's completely changed now. So I call that an answers-based paradigm. The more stuff you knew, the better your advantages from a business standpoint. There's a whole different argument about knowledge being inherently useful, and I can go for that, but I'm just talking about from a sheerly practical get a job standpoint. Now, of course, we have instant access to almost the entirety of the world's information. So all of a sudden, it's not about knowing all the answers, it's about asking the right questions. And so how to sort that information, and one more thing, and we call this QEMCI, which stands for the ability to quickly and effectively master complicated information, which is just a fancy way of saying, do you know how to learn? Because now it's like technology disrupts things so quickly that what every business needs is somebody to come in and say, we just got disrupted. What got disrupted? How do we fix it? What's the new solution? How do I obtain the information for that and apply it to my problem? And that's very much a questions based paradigm. And then here's the inherent problem. colleges and traditional education is very much designed from an answers-based standpoint. Not only that, they're designed to have almost no tolerance for failure. If you're not a 4.0, you might not get into school. If you're not a 3.8, you might not get into graduate school. And so the problem is that in the world we live in today, the only place that really matters is in academia, right? And the real world, it's like, oh, social media just disrupted, AI just disrupted all of our marketing algorithms. This has just happened to our company. And so now we have to figure out what's going wrong. And that means we have to try 17 things that don't work and fail. And we have to have a tolerance for that failure to try the 18th thing that does. All right. That was a very long way of setting up the question that you asked, which is, what are some other options? Well, it's important to know that other options are the kinds of options that require people to be able to ask questions. So now what we have is we have businesses saying, what the colleges are providing is not necessarily what I need. What I need is I need people who can ask these questions. And you see then these growing opportunities, especially in very business close careers. So marketing, sales, copywriting, those kinds of technology, AI. Nobody really cares if you have a degree in AI. It would be outdated by the time you actually did something. All those things don't require the kind of traditional credentials that we had before. And then secondly, things like the trades are not being disrupted by AI. So you have not only the ability to do just hands-on work, but you also have all these jobs related to who can supervise the hands-on work. Nobody needs a project manager that has a degree if they already know that they can handle a construction project because they've been able to do so from experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I think you have a good way of kind of shifting the perspective, on the different, like, it's not the answers, it's the questions. And I think the more we can lean into questions, I mean, that's just such a principle of life and relationships too, right? Like Jesus was a question asker. And of course he had the answers and he is the answer, but like he approached people through a lot of questions. So I just find that
Well, he got us
I
there
like
by,
that.
I tell my students all the time, if you ask a question and I just give you the answer, you may or may not believe me depending on our relationship, right? And
Yeah,
there's some
right.
level where you may not want to believe me, right?
Yeah.
But if I can respond with a question, which is kind of the Jesus way, that allows you to get to the same answer, now you've convinced yourself, and that's powerful. So that
Yeah,
ends up being true universally and was
right.
before when we were in answers-based paradigm as well. Just that
Yeah,
ability to communicate starts with that, and especially with those of us who might have children that we're struggling to reach in different ways, you know,
right.
certain kids will respond to, "I have the answer," and certain kids will not, and we have to be more creative on the
Absolutely.
second one, so, yeah.
Well, and isn't it true that you don't know if you know it unless you've, like, taught it to
Right.
somebody
You've
or said
experienced
it,
it, yeah.
right? And so asking a question, making you think through so often, they already know the answer, they just need help bringing it out. Okay, let's talk about why this day and age is uniquely set up to succeed in non-college jobs. I mean, I think you've alluded to that a little bit with AI or some of the things that, but develop that more.
Yeah, I think that this is the kind of thing that, the security blanket of a college degree is that that's the way the world worked, and so there was an easy, like, punch the thing, like, check, 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 got a degree, get a job. And that's not untrue. I mean, there's still a swath of the economy that works, and if you're going that route, I mean, you're going to find some advantages, right? But I think more and more you're seeing employers going, boy, the information I need is not being represented by a degree. And so as that becomes more widespread, you see more and more opportunities. And here's the kind of fundamental thing that people can sometimes understand it. When I went to work in the admissions office of a college, when I arrived there, the way to advance was to apprentice yourself to the director and the dean, do what they did because they had spent 30 years learning how to do the business, and the business had changed very little in 30 years. 6 months after I got there, what I found was the dean director coming to me saying, "Do you know how to use the internet?" In other words, and almost every 6 months from there forward, some radical technological change happened where the people at the top were coming to the people at the bottom, and I'm talking about age-wise, right? And saying, "Do you understand this?" And so there's been a complete inversion in the marketplace in terms of, you've got people who are decision makers for companies saying, "I don't know what TikTok is, but all of a sudden it's really important. I don't know what AI is, but all of a sudden it's disrupting everything." Who knows that? Well, often the people that have had the curiosity and the drive and the interest to learn it. Now, to translate that to your question, why are there more jobs open that are not open to college degrees? Because that pace of change, that disruption, is moving so fast that there's a growing awareness that, man, if I hire a kid that just closeted themselves in 4 years to learn about a bunch of stuff that was outdated when they started, they're even farther behind when they graduate. I'll give you an example. I won't hire anybody to work for us in marketing that has a marketing degree, because that just means you spent 4 years wasting your time listening to people doing outdated stuff. Marketing is changing on almost a weekly basis because of disruptions coming from AI and social media algorithms. I need somebody who is intrigued to try to figure out those things as a kid and then remained intrigued and kept teaching themselves and is willing to try and fail and try and fail and try and fail and learn and has that curiosity. And that's far more important than a credential. And so you're seeing a widening of those jobs, which isn't then even to touch the absolute explosion of trades related work, which has never needed a college degree. And yet, I think I tell young people the fastest path to $100,000 salary lies through the blue collar path at this point. Just empirically, almost in any county, in any place in America, if you're willing to learn how to weld or how to plumb, especially, or be an electrician, you are just a few years away from that kind of six-figure salary, almost no matter where you are.
Wow. As we talk to foster parents primarily who are listening, why is this good news for them? Like, what is this? How explain like the connection at why we're talking about this?
So I can't talk about this aside from my faith. I believe in Christ, and then through Christianity. And so I believe in the redemption of all things. I believe that Christ redeems all things. I also believe, I said earlier that to thrive means to live resiliently. I believe that means to understand you live in a busted, fallen world, so you're not naive, and yet you live in light of a hope that eclipses the brokenness. And I think this is particularly true with foster children, right? There is undeniable, like the very fact that you have a foster child means something was busted in a really significant way, right? And so to ignore that is to be naive and stupid. We can't do that, right? We have to say, yes, something terrible happened here. Something that wasn't supposed to happen happened. But to stop there and to thrive, to be mired in that is to doom yourself to like, we have to only live in the existence of this brokenness. Well, we do live in a broken world, but we live in light of a hope that eclipses that. So we have to say, but we believe in a God that redeems all things, including all this terrible stuff that happened to you. And that's not to ignore it. It's not to say that it didn't happen. It's just to say, and it's not to say that, God's going to magically make it all better this side of eternity. It is to say in ways that we can't fully believe a redemption process is in progress. And so consequently then, I look at foster children and say, okay, you want to talk about people that are resilient? You want to talk about people that can survive? You want to talk about people that can, put their head down and sort of make it through something? You want to talk about people that can, like, there's all kinds of unique skills that come from being a foster child that are not the kinds of things we'd want you to learn. I mean, like, not the way we want to teach
right,
it to
not
you,
the way, yeah.
but it's undeniable they're there. And those skills are often resilient skills. And if they can be acknowledged and seen as such, and we can encourage them to lean into the positive aspects of those, that's unique because we live in a market now where we have very little resilient people. So your average child who's not a foster child has almost no experience with hardship, and yet they're going to have it, right? A foster child's like, hardship's the only thing I know. This is not surprising to me. A 9-to-5 job, this is fantastic. Where some other kids like a 9-to-5 job, you mean that I can't, stay in bed till 11? And so it just changes everything to have that resilience piece there.
Yeah, that's really great. So, what are some proper expectations that a foster parent, maybe a foster parent who's ultimately adopted the child and now this child is growing up, or just a foster parent of teens getting ready to launch? What are some proper expectations that they could have and that they could extend to their kids as well?
I'm going to answer this carefully, and I want your audience to not hear this as somebody who thinks that they're an expert and has figured this out. My adopted foster children are 4 and 2. So now I have 4 of my own children have graduated, and I have a ringside seat to watching lots of kids go through this, but I want to be careful to not pretend a knowledge that I don't have here. And so instead of saying, here's the answer, I'd like to say, here's something that my wife and I think about and pray about and struggle with every day. And I think it's worth the struggle, even if I'm not sure of the exact answer. And I'm going to take you on a quick side quest to explain, to set up what I need to explain here.
Love it.
Our company runs 4 live events for students in our post-high school program a year. These are young adults between the ages of generally 16 and 25, mostly between 18 and 22. Years ago, through a twist that I won't get into all the details of, we were required to set a set of rules in front of these children. And I thought that as a former young adult myself, I remember going to a conference and they had a big sign that said, "Do not climb the side of the building." And I did not know that climbing the side of the building was a potential possibility until then. But as soon as I saw the sign, I knew that as soon as the curfew was over, as soon as curfew was at, I was sneaking out to climb the side of the building, right? I mean, like there's a whole Christianity thing there about the law and all that kind of stuff that's real, right? Okay. And so there's this huge list of rules they want us to have. And I just thought, if I put this in front of these young people, they're going to go, man, let's see how many of these we can break.
Yep.
So instead, I said, rule 1 is wear your name tag. Rule 2 is don't break curfew. Rule 3 is don't leave camp without telling me. Rule 4 is don't be stupid. And in rule 5 is if you feel like being stupid, see rule 4. Rule 6, if you don't know the difference between stupid and okay, come and talk to me. We'll talk about it. But at the end of the day, I get to decide. And if we disagree, you go home and I stay here, right? And I said it very tongue-in-cheek, and it just caught fire. And so many years later, we have Rule 4 T-shirts and Rule 4 mugs. And like I have kids who've called me literally at every hour on the clock to ask if this is a Rule 4 violation. And quick shortcut, if it's between 11 and 5 a.m., the answer is almost always yes. You're calling me. But here's the thing that's really striking to me. I've never had anybody significantly violate any rule at any of our events, and we're up to hundreds of them at this point. In other words, it doesn't matter where the kids come from. It doesn't matter what the background is. Having the expectation that they would be adults and act like it. And we say rule 4, don't be stupid, means to treat others the way you want to be treated and act like an adult. And when we say the expectation is you act like an adult, my experience is they exceed that. Now, I don't know exactly why that is. And I'm not saying that that's like universal and work in every situation. I'm just telling you that I'm, since 2010, so I'm 16 years deep in this experiment, and I've yet to have anybody significantly violate the rules at one of my events, and I do 4 to 8 a year, right? So if that gives you some idea. Okay, so what does that mean? I think from a foster parent perspective, one of our biggest challenges is to hold high expectations for our young people while exercising almost infinite patience in getting to them. And so I would just say that, don't worry about college. Don't worry about all those credentials that everybody else is talking about, but have an expectation that this young person has problems that can be redeemed by one who redeems all things, that they can live a life where they thrive, that they can have a meaningful, purposeful life that is really important and special and wonderful, and that expectation almost by itself is enough. And then how that plays out is as unique as you and your child and the circumstances that they're in, and probably requires far more patience than we would like to think. And if we knew about it, we would quit right now, and is going to require help from other outside people, and is going to require work, and is going to require tears and blood and sweat, and yet that it's possible. And I think it's holding that expectation that is the important part, even though that somewhat masks the work that's going to be required to do that.
Yeah, I love that. Well, we let them rise up, give them and show them we believe they can. I like
And
it.
sometimes, you're talking about kids that never had anybody that believed in them,
Right.
right?
Absolutely.
So, when they all of a sudden say, "Oh, this person trusts me," or this person, but I say that knowing that trust is scary. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm now on 5 kids that I've given the keys to and watched them drive away, and I trust them to drive well, and I also know that, and at least one of them rides a motorcycle, and that's even worse. And it's like I trust that you make wise decisions, and I also know that a piece of me is going to be in pain until I see you get back safely, or you call me, and as they
Right.
move out, I don't even get that certainty, right? And so
Yeah.
there is that part that is always painful. So
Yeah, for sure. I want to move in a little bit. We know that how companies and organizations work is key to helping our kids understand like how they might be able to build a career. Um, and so like as we talk with our kids and we set expectations high, right, for them, we also want to give them concrete, like practical help and guidance, right? So, what would be some language that you would encourage for parents and foster parents to say, okay, honey, here's how work works. Like, here's like, let's kind
yeah.
of define what it even is.
So we talk about work all the time with our students and with my children and with our employees in various companies we run. And we say, let me think less about work and more about the creation of value. If you think that work is the least or maximum amount of effort I can put in a certain set of hours, and that if I trade my hours that I owe you money. It's not that that's not the truth. Excuse me. It's not that that's not true. It's just not the truth, right? I mean, like that is true, but it's not the whole truth. And you can be adequate as an employee, and you could maybe even get advanced a little bit, but you're missing the real picture. And the real picture is not complicated and it's not secret. This isn't about secret knowledge. This is just about being able to see the reality that's present for everybody. And once you see that, it changes everything. So there's two things we break this down to categories and we talk to our students and our employees about. And the first is, don't underestimate how powerful what used to be normal is now. And I just mean, don't underestimate how powerful it is that you show up, that you work while you're there, and that you treat other people the way you want to be treated, that you look somebody in the eye and you're able to hold a conversation. So these seem like really simple skills. And I tell our students, it gives you superpowers. If you think this is normal, do that in a work setting and all of a sudden find yourself getting promoted because a vast part of your peer group, and we're not talking about foster students here, we're talking about peer group period, they don't have ability to do that. They don't know how to show up on time. They don't know how to work hard. We run a farm market and we have people in a coffee shop and a deli and on the store and stuff like that. And, it's really rare when we find a kid who doesn't get lost in their phone the second a customer doesn't come in the door and instead turns around and picks up a broom or a mop. That kid's automatically flagged. The first time there's a gap, the new employee comes in, there's a gap, and they pick up a broom or a mop instead of a phone, we know they're going to be a shift lead within a month. Because it's just so unusual.
Wow.
And so there's just some level of good work ethic is really important. The second one is, if you can think like an owner. And what I mean by that is you want to really get a black belt in work. You want to really just be different than everybody else. Just wonder, how can I create value? It's not about I'm here and I'm serving coffee. What is it that's really ultimately needed here? Well, what's ultimately needed is that we serve coffee in a way that our repeat customers come back. The people that come in for the first time tell us about us to other people, and that we minimize wastage and things like that. Like those things allow us to, do lots of things. Pass on more tips to you, raise your wages, keep the doors open, those kinds of things. And just a little bit of thinking like that will change. There's trash on the floor. I should pick that up. That's the third time somebody asked for that drink that we didn't make. I should ask if we could make that drink. I noticed that we're using 2 of these cups because they always leak. If we bought a different cup but paid more for it, we probably would save more money overall. The farther up you get the ownership change, the less you see those things, but the more important they become. And when you have employees that are willing to see those things, it changes everything. And those are very simple. They don't require you to be a superstar. It doesn't require you to be super smart. It doesn't require you to have a perfect family. It's just, can you do basic things? And are you willing to think a little bit past where you are and what the next person above you is and how you can best serve them? That could be transformative in multiple ways.
I love that ability just to give a little bit of a vision for when you do this. And we're not talking crazy rocket science here. We're talking, but if you haven't grown up and had that example, or if you haven't ever seen it, or you've never been taught it, it does feel like rocket science because it's it's just not even in your thinking. And so that's such a service we can give to our kids.
And if you're a kid and let's say I'm used to doing hard things, well then you might be more likely to pick up a broom than a phone because you're expecting it to be hard. That's a good thing, right? Or I've really, people always screamed at me, so I'm going to commit to not screaming at other people. I'm going to try to do the opposite. That sometimes those things that are real tragedies, they're real sins, they're real evil that's happened to you, and we're not dismissing them, but this is a way to redeem them. This is a way to say, this has given me a unique perspective. I'm doubly certain that I'm never going to lose my cool and scream at my coworker. It's easy for me to pick up a broom. Are you kidding? I'm in the air conditioning and I've got a job. This is really, and so there's ways that kind of lends to that whole redemption story.
Moving, I'm just thinking a little bit back, pulling out something you said earlier, Jonathan, about asking good questions. Give us some practical help to train our kids in asking good questions.
I tell students and I tell my own children this, that obviously there's all kinds of techniques and you can go real far down the rabbit hole in learning these things. But I ask them to think of 2 things. The first is nothing can beat natural curiosity. So if you're just willing to ask the next question, which is, and so some of that comes with a mindset. I tell, we try to train our students and say, every answer should be a place that allows you to ask a better question. Because so oftentimes people go, "Oh, I have a college degree. I don't need to learn anything else." Or, "Oh, I got the job. I don't need to learn." I mean, that's a real fallacy that happens. If instead you go, "No, if I'm alive, there's still things to be learned." And so every time I get an answer, I'm like, "Oh, I'm in a spot to ask a better question." That kind of fosters that curiosity. The second, and I have to say this because I don't want this to sound weird, I challenge our students and my own children to say, like, everywhere you look, there's a game being played that's underneath the game that you see, right? Like, there's something deeper. And I don't mean hidden knowledge. I don't mean some sort of weird, like, secret something or other. It's just that there's always something under the surface, right? Like, that person that comes in that's grumpy, that's normally not, when you get under the surface, you find out that their dog of 13 years just died that morning. Right, like
Right.
that. All of a
Right.
sudden, there's something else going on there. When it's like your owner's really frustrated because you didn't sweep the floor, well, what you didn't know is that, a great customer came in the other day and just chewed them out and said they're never coming back here and they're not going to rent the facility because there was trash on the floor and they're
Mhm.
worried about the fact the electric bill just went up and now they don't know how to pay it, right? Like there's a whole series of things underneath
Right.
the surface that
Right.
that and so if you just have this idea that one, it's a good thing to be curious, an answer is just a place to ask a better question. And two, there's always something under the surface that you don't know. There's a game being played that's beyond the one that you see, then that's not about like, oh, there's like I don't talk like something sort of conspiracy or something like that. I just mean that there's something deeper to look at. And I think as Christians that makes sense, right? I mean, we believe that there's a broader story that we're a part of. There's a redemption arc that is bigger than us, that we are the link between very important things that have happened and will happen. And so there is things underneath the surface. And we love to quote C.S. Lewis and say, you've never met a mere mortal, right? I mean, everybody you've met is either an everlasting splendor or an immortal horror. And so we tell our students all the time, you've never met anybody and you never will meet anybody who's not made in the image of God. So you don't have the luxury of fighting orcs. In Middle Earth, you can fight orcs and be happy killing evil things. In the real world, you have to know that every person you meet has both in them, right? Like they're made in the image of God, but they're marred by sin. And that means that there's always something under the surface. And being able to have that curiosity puts you in this place to ask questions. And then as you get older, you get more and more skilled at asking those questions. Don't be surprised if you don't know how to do that to begin with. It's a process that you'll learn over your lifetime.
Yeah, that's so good. And not everybody is comfortable with a lot of questions either. Sometimes you might ask a good question and get no answer.
Mhm.
And I think that's just real too.
And it's not always about like, you don't want to be the 4-year-old. Why, why? You
Yeah.
be a little more sophisticated than that. But sometimes it's just like, that's interesting. I wonder what's going on there. That's not asking the
Mhm.
question, hey, what's up with you? That's going, ooh,
Yeah.
I wonder what's going on there. And then you might get to that some other way. And that might just be
Yeah,
by
that's a good point.
listening. It might just be by
Mhm.
like, I refuse to get mad at this person. I'm not gonna get frustrated. It might be I'm just gonna smile and laugh and not and shrug that off. I mean, it's not always about asking the question. It's about having the curiosity to say, I bet you there's more here that I don't know. I'm going to wait. I'm going to listen. I'm going to perhaps ask a question, or I'm just going to be with this person to learn that. And I think that takes a lot of pressure off. You don't have to you have to be some question asking wizard to employ this. So
It's really like you said, it's a curiosity of
it's a
going,
mindset.
maybe there's something different. Yes, that's right. Well, one other key to success when our kids leave the nest and become adults is community, is having people around them. Um, how have you found community? What role does it play in career success?
I think that the kind of dirty truth that people are unwilling to often face is that we have accidentally assumed that credentials replace community as a way to actually drive careers. And again, it's not that that's not true. It's just it's not the truth, right? I mean, is it the case that your credential can get you a completely random job because you applied somewhere and that moved you to the next thing? Sure, absolutely. Is that going to be the way you get your job the whole way through? Absolutely, positively not. Almost certainly from that point forward, it's going to be who you know. Even if it's just in terms of somebody gave you a stellar reference or you got connected to somebody else. And so sometimes I think it's helpful to just say, look, careers and community are inextricably linked and you can't separate them. And when we talk about foster care, the grand tragedy of foster students, foster children, is that we expect them to be able to perform, and they might have even better skills because of some of the resilience we talked about, but they often lack the opportunity to bring them to fruition because they lack the community to give them the connections. And so I don't have a magic bullet to say, like, this is how you solve that. But again, sometimes it's about asking the question. And it's about acknowledging what's important. If you want to help a young person more than anything else, give them a good community. And you say, well, how do you do that? Sometimes it's as simple as opening your home. Clearly, in a foster care situation, that's literal. But in a non-foster care situation, or even so, it's, if you have foster children, it's opening your home to other people. It's where do you start with what you have?
Mm, mm,
We open our home to a bunch of young adults, sometimes as many as 70 on a Thursday night. That sounds awesome. I will tell you, it is some of the hardest things that we do because so many
mm,
times we feel inadequate. Our house is dirty, or, we didn't wash the dishes, or we might have just had a fight with the kids because we had to
mm.
clean up for Thursday night.
Yeah.
Or, I'm feeling really inadequate because there's so many repairs that I haven't been able to get to. And now we have people here. And yet, if we had waited for it to be perfect, we would still be waiting. Instead, almost 600 kids have come through our doors since 2019, and that has transformed our lives. And so there's an element of, a willingness, despite your imperfections, the transparency that can often be quite painful, and the realization that it all starts with community. That, if you're looking for the most important thing you can do, find a way to bolster, help, support, join, or create community in whatever spot God has put you in.
Well, as we get ready to close here, I want to thank you for sharing because I think that this is it's a helpful framework as we help our kids launch, the kids that have been placed in our care and the kids that we have permanently, right? It's just we want to help them launch. We want to help young adults grow into healthy adults. And I'm just going to ask for this final question. Just give us one thing that you would advise foster parents to focus on with their teenage children right now, to help them as they transition out of high school.
I think that this comes back to something we already talked about. I think that there is nothing you can do that is more special, more loving, and more impactful than to hold a high expectation for your child combined with the patience to get to that expectation, no matter how much time and how much effort it takes. That doesn't mean you have high expectations and you're constantly belittling a child for failing. That's not what we're talking about at all. It's to say, I'm not going to change the expectation, but when you don't meet it, instead of belittling for that, I'm going to say, I need to become more creative. God needs to give me more perspective. I need to learn more things. I need to be more patient so that we can get you to that. And you don't compromise the expectation. I think that is a priceless gift for any young person, doesn't matter. And it's particularly priceless for foster children whom the system constantly belittles and says, you probably can't do this. We're going to lower the bar. So it's this combination of keeping the high bar and then combining that with the patience and endurance to help them get over it, even when you have to put them on your back and carry them to get there.
Yeah. Wow. Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for sharing. And I'm excited for our listeners to hear this and grow and gain some good insight through it. Thanks for being on today.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for all that you do. It was a blessing for us to learn about what y'all do, and to be able to be a part of it has been a real privilege. Thank you.
Thank you again for listening today. I hope this episode resonated with you. Let us know your thoughts. We really love hearing from you. And as always, if you want to learn more about TFI, catch up on past episodes, read engaging articles, or partner with us on mission with a gift of any amount, head over to theforgotteninitiative.org. And until next time, remember, if you're feeling overwhelmed, misunderstood, or questioning, why am I doing what I'm doing? Remember, you have a whole community here who cares for you. And even more, Jesus is fully able to meet your every need. Lean on Him and find rest in Him today. I look so forward to being together again very soon.
Resonate.